Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, upping the ante, Iran commandeers ships in the Strait of Hormuz as the White House floats new deadlines for a deal. And hiding in plain sight, the religious ideology driving the Islamic regime, why it has no interest in putting the brakes on conflict. Plus, a life remembered. One widow honors a husband who loved his family and his country. And revisiting the founding of modern Israel. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Julie Stahl.
And I'm Paul Petit. President Trump says that the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is getting a 3-week extension and that Iran cannot finance Hezbollah.
Meanwhile, pressure mounts on Tehran from Israel, the U.S., and from within. Here's the latest on these and other stories.
Iran's takeover of cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz is heightening tensions in the region, as questions remain about whether Tehran will return to the negotiating table. President Donald Trump is pressing for a unified response from Iranian leaders to a proposed peace framework. According to the White House, Iran is facing intense pressure as its government struggles under severe economic strain, describing the regime as weakened and nearing financial collapse.
Operation Economic Fury continues, and the effective and successful naval blockade continues as well of ships and vessels that are moving to and from Iranian ports. We are completely strangling their economy through this blockade. They're losing $500 million a day.
Officials indicate Tehran may have a short window, possibly just days, to present its response. The expectations include a halt to nuclear ambitions, an end to support terrorism, and a cessation of threats to key waterways like the Strait of Hormuz. In return, the framework suggests the possibility of economic recovery and stability for the Iranian people, who have endured decades of hardship under the current regime. The administration maintains that despite ongoing diplomatic efforts, the pressure campaign remains firmly in place as it awaits Tehran's next move. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pushed back on reports of a firm deadline.
I know there's been some anonymous sourced reporting that there was maybe a 3 to 5 day deadline. That is not true. The president has not set a deadline himself. Ultimately, he will dictate the timetable.
Meanwhile, a U.S. intelligence official said Iran still has thousands of missiles and drones that can threaten the U.S. and Israeli forces. In southern Lebanon, the Iran-backed Hezbollah launched rockets at Israeli forces, violating a fragile ceasefire. The Israel Defense Forces responded, striking the launcher. In a separate development, Israeli troops working in close coordination with the local Christian community in the southern Lebanese village of Dabel replaced a statue of Jesus at a local church that had been damaged by an IDF soldier. The IDF says its northern command acted promptly after receiving reports of the incident, helping facilitate the restoration. Military officials stated they are taking steps to ensure similar incidents do not happen again. Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem. President Trump made the announcement after what he called a historic second round of talks at the White House.
They've agreed to an additional 3 weeks of, no firing, ceasefire. And we think that the president of Lebanon and the prime minister of Israel over the next couple of weeks will be coming here. They actually like each other, Lebanon and Israel.
Trump also said that the United States is going to work with Lebanon in order to help it protect itself from Hezbollah. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar says peace between Israel and Lebanon is possible, but only without Hezbollah.
Hezbollah is common enemy of Israel and Lebanon.
At the same time, Trump made clear Israel still reserves the right to defend itself.
Israel is going to have to defend itself if they're shot, but they're going to do it carefully and they're going to be surgical.
The president again made clear that the U.S. is still demanding that Iran stop its backing of proxy groups in the Mideast, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, as part of any deal between Washington and Tehran to end the U.S. war on Iran.
Yeah,
that's a must for you.
Yeah, sure. That's a must, yeah.
Meanwhile, Tehran says it will not reopen the Strait of Hormuz as long as the United States continues its blockade of Iranian ports. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf says a complete ceasefire only has meaning if it is not violated through a naval blockade. He adds reopening the Strait of Hormuz is not possible amid a blatant violation of the ceasefire. Reports from inside Iran suggest growing division at the top. An unsourced television report says Ghalibaf has stepped down from leading negotiations with the United States after pressure from Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders. Iranian officials deny the story. The New York Times reports Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei remains mentally sharp and engaged after being wounded in a major strike. But Israeli and American officials believe he's not functioning as the country's true supreme leader, suggesting instead that the real power now rests with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, indicating the military may be steering both diplomacy and war decisions. And after President Trump's remarks on divisions in Iran's leadership, Khamenei posted that Iranian cohesion has become even greater and more steel-like. Meanwhile, CNN reports the U.S. is planning new strikes on Iran if the ceasefire fails. And Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz says Israel is preparing for the possibility of renewed conflict with Iran.
Israel is prepared for the resumption of war against Iran. The IDF is prepared both defensively and offensively, and the targets are marked. We're waiting for a green light from the United States.
Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
All right, so a 3-week extension on the ceasefire. And you know what's interesting here is that many Israelis, matter of fact, the majority of Israelis, and this is coming from a study, say that they prefer that they finish the job with Hezbollah. In other words, don't stop the fighting. That says a lot.
Yeah, it does. You know, I mean, people keep talking about a nuclear Iran, but really, Iran has for decades been funding these terror groups that are trying to get rid of Israel. And you know, Israel doesn't want to just kick the can down the road and say, oh, great, it's quiet for now. They've been glad for this little bit of respite to have a Memorial Day and picnics on Independence Day. But, you know, this is not a long-term solution, and it's no good if it comes up back in a year or 5 years or 10 years. It'll just be worse.
And you were talking about the funding as well, obviously Iran being behind that, and President Trump saying, well, one of the stipulations is that Iran stop funding these proxy groups. Is that even realistic?
I don't think so, and I don't think Iran thinks so. You know, they are doing what they're doing because they believe this is their goal for Shiite Islam to take over the world. They even think Jesus is going to help them do it. But in the process, they plan to get rid of Christians and Jews and anyone who goes against them and won't convert to Shiite Islam and worship their God. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I don't think that's realistic.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. It's almost like, you know, asking a believer who knows and is taught that they're supposed to tithe to a church not to give to the church anymore. That can't happen if you're to obey God.
Yeah. Any of these things that God tells us to do, you can't just stop doing them because they say it's not God.
Yeah, and I was talking with Chris Mitchell about it. He said there might be some opportunity here and that all those people, hundreds of thousands that had to leave Beirut, maybe it will start a groundswell of getting a resistance, a protest, if you will, of the people that say enough of Hezbollah, Lebanon, the president take over. What do you think?
It would be great. I think there may even be that many people, but they don't have the power, and that's a big issue, that they don't have the military power to actually rule. And so that's why they've been under Hezbollah, under Iran. And if they can have that groundswell and the military backing, I think they would probably do it in a minute.
Yeah, maybe that's something that has to happen as part of the negotiations. We'll see.
Yeah, we will.
President Trump says the war with Iran could end soon, but some experts say he's overlooking the most important factor, religion. CBN's Gary Lane spoke with Middle East historian Raymond Ibrahim about Shia end times beliefs, which involve the emergence of one person who will bring about an Islamic world order, the 12th Imam.
The Mahdi is a central figure in both Sunni and Shia Islam. He's an eschatological end-time figure, and the word itself means the guided one. So both Sunnis and Shias expect him to return to bring justice and goodness. Now, on the surface, this sounds good, but of course, from an Islamic paradigm, what does that mean? Well, if he's actually bringing goodness, that means he's bringing Islam, he's bringing the Sharia worldview, and he's fighting everyone who is seen as the enemy of Islam, of course. But it's well known that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard especially espouses this ideology. And this ideology is really rife with concepts of martyrdom and sacrifice. So as you can see, this is not the exact mentality that you would want to have weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons. But when you have a group whose ideology is very much centered around bringing the end times in a mystical manner, and the end times are to be ushered in when the greatest enemies of Islam are defeated, which from an Iranian perspective would be the two great Satans, of course, the United States and Israel. And then this whole concept, you're probably familiar, you've seen Ashura, where basically the Shias to commemorate the martyrdom of Hussein, whip themselves in a frenzy. Okay, so it's this sort of embattled mentality that has gone on for centuries that sees themselves as martyrs, as victims, as having to do whatever they have to do, including whatever sacrifice, in order to bring about the goodness of Islam in the person of the Mahdi.
Well, President Trump knows that. I mean, he said they cannot have a nuclear weapon because of that. So knowing they think this way, how do you then negotiate with them? How do you work deals? Can they be trusted to abide by them?
Well, this is the problem. And then there's another problem that actually compounds this, the first one. And again, it's almost, we can argue, particular to Shia Islam of Iran. And it's the doctrine of taqiyya. Taqiyya is this doctrine that allows Muslims to dissemble and essentially actively lie vis-a-vis the non-Muslim as required. And it has Quranic verses. One of the most primary ones is Quran 328. But what's interesting is if you argue with, and I've been in these debates before, and apologists will argue with me and say, no, it's just a Shia doctrine. And the fact is, Shias have indeed, of course, championed taqiyya. It's been very much integral to their identity simply because they were the minority version, the minority Islam sect in the larger sect, the Sunnis. So they had more reason to dissemble around the Sunnis who would attack and kill them if they knew who they were. So this has gone on for centuries, and it's been said that the Shias are essentially, they have so internalized deception and duplicity. And I'm sorry to have to say this, and I'm not applying this to every single Iranian or even every single Shia, but I would say that it's fair to believe that the Iranian leadership, the regime, and especially, again, the Islamic Revolutionary Corps, does internalize and take on aspects of taqiyya, which essentially allow them to lie and deceive the infidel. So taken together, Mahdiism, martyrdom, sacrifice, eschatology, and then free reign to lie, yeah, I can see a strong argument to be made about not being able to trust the Iranian leadership.
This week, all across Israel, towns and cities held ceremonies to remember Israel's fallen soldiers. Sirens sounded and all activity stopped for a national moment of reflection. This past year alone, at least 170 soldiers were killed in battles, impacting lives across the country.
I had the chance to speak with a widow of an IDF soldier left to pick up the pieces after her husband was killed by a Hezbollah rocket. Israel marks Memorial Day with a ceremonial flame lighting at the Western Wall. For some families, though, the loss of a fallen soldier is felt every single day.
Many times I get asked if this is like a hard day for me. And for me, like personally, it's not, because I live this like reality every day.
37-year-old Gal Raviv Galea is a mother of three. Her husband, Major Itai Galea, died in 2024 during a Hezbollah rocket attack.
I think it is important for others to remember, because I mean, it's not just our history, it's our reality and our presence.
Gal's reality is to know what it's like to build a life together and have it shatter in an instant.
He loved being a father. He got to be a dad for two of our three kids.
That all changed on October 7th. Called up as a reservist, Itai went north to fight Hezbollah.
He was supposed to be back because I had an ultrasound for the pregnancy.
Gal was 34 weeks pregnant with her third child. Then everything changed for her when soldiers arrived at her door.
You see three soldiers, three people in uniform standing in front of you. There is no other reason they could be here.
In that one moment, Gal's world collapsed.
It's the biggest shock of my life. I was so much not expecting it. I didn't understand like how it could be. And it's the biggest heartbreak.
Then Gal had to try to pick up the pieces for herself and her children.
It was very hard. I think having kids forces you to function and not feel that they just lost their dad. I don't want them to feel that everything else is also breaking down around them. But it was very hard because you break down every second that you're not with the kids.
Each day finding a way forward. Today, Gal's children are 8, 5, and just 20 months old. Gal is determined their father will not be forgotten.
It's interesting because at first it was very hard for me to look at pictures. I really could not, but actually my kids asked to look at pictures, and it forced me to look at pictures because they would sit next to me and they would just look at pictures. And I guess it was a therapy for me too.
Through her children, family, and the IDF Widows and Orphans organization, Gal found love and support.
This is an amazing program, and it helped me so much. And the birth of Romy, my third child, was amazing because I didn't feel alone in that sense. They have camps for kids, for orphans. Again, something I couldn't even listen to at the beginning, but I know that it's so important for my kids as part of understanding and feeling that it's not something to be ashamed of.
While grief sometimes fades away momentarily, for Gal, the memory of Itai will always remain.
I would want my kids to remember him or to know him as like this very kind, smart, intelligent person that loved being in action and doing things and just always with a smile on his face.
A man with a smile who loved his family and his country.
He was very Zionist. He kept telling me, this is the last time I'm going to do reserve duty. I'm like done with it. I'm old. But he kept coming. So it was like in his blood.
A life of service and a family forever changed.
I will never accept that this happened. Like I will never be in peace with it, but I understand that this is my reality.
A nation was born in a day in 1948 when a declaration signed in a Tel Aviv art gallery announced the birth of the modern Jewish state.
CBN's Scott Ross, who's no longer with us, looked back at that moment with someone who was there. Here's his report from a few years ago.
We're in a historic setting here. Where are we and what happened?
This is the room where the Jewish state of Israel was born 70 years ago. In this tiny room with these same furnitures, a ceremony that lasted 32 minutes and shook the world.
As British rulers left Israel that day, 5 Arab armies invaded.
So it's like when you mix the happiest day for the Jewish people, one of the greatest moments for our nation in modern times, with one of the most dangerous and sad days when Israel was that close to a complete annihilation.
Why this building? Why here? Why Tel Aviv?
This building was simply the safest auditorium in the city of Tel Aviv.
Who were the people that were here?
Most of them people from around Tel Aviv, because they could not invite people from Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was disconnected. Only 350 of them were lucky enough to be squeezed in the room with no air conditioning.
And among the crowd of witnesses was Yael Sharet.
Her father was on the stage here, Moshe Sharet. He was the right hand of Ben Gurion and the kind of the foreign minister of the provisional government of Israel.
I met Yael Sharet Medini at her home near Tel Aviv.
Here's my aunt, and this is my forehead. Hopefully there's something behind it, as I say, and we shared a chair there, next to the wall.
She told me how just the day before, her father dictated and Yael wrote a draft of the Declaration of Independence.
This is my father's version of the Declaration. The one that he dictated to me, this is my handwriting. This is a photocopy of the original. Yeah. The original is in the archive.
Yael simply calls herself a handmaiden of history.
Do you remember the event itself when Ben Gurion stood up and read?
It's epic. It's really epic. It's poetry, actually. The only time I was really moved, I must say, was when the Rabbi Levine made the old age Jewish blessing, Shechianu v'kiyimanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
That ancient Jewish prayer, recited on momentous occasions, thanks God who has given us life, sustained us, and allowed us to reach this day.
I'm not religious, but this blessing has an echo of generations.
Did you sing?
Hatikva, yes. And then everybody stood up, and it was the anthem, the national anthem.
The very next day, which was the Sabbath, President Harry Truman became the first world leader to recognize Israel.
The Pentagon and the State Department truly believed that Ben-Gurion, the leader of Israel, is leading the world into a new catastrophe. One person, however, thought differently. His name was Harry Truman. He understood something that most of his top advisors and ministers failed to see. This is truly a prophecy being realized.
70 years later, it's clear that Truman was right.
We are faster, better, prettier than ever today. The economy of Israel is doing wonderfully well. They call a startup nation. And now we see Israel standing, and thanks God, together with the Americans, in the spirit of those countries who are leading. Suddenly people understand why we are here.
Scott Ross for CBN in Tel Aviv.
That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us.
And remember to follow us on social media, and please keep praying for wisdom for our leaders, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and for the best possible outcome for the people of Iran, of Lebanon, and all the Middle East.
And pray for protection for Israel and for the peace of Jerusalem. And remember, the God who watches over Israel and you and me neither slumbers nor sleeps. I'm Julie Stahl. For all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.